Eloi, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. Do you want to quickly introduce yourself?
Thank you so much for having me in. My name is Eloi Andaluz. I am coming from a town close to Barcelona, and I have been working on VFX for a while. I have been right now 7 years at the Scanline VFX, doing mostly the extractions, but my background is in architecture. I did a transition right around 15 years ago. At the beginning, 3D was my hobby. And over time, it became my main job. And yeah, I have been working in advertising, rock shows, mapping shows, and everything in between.
I love that. I'm kind of curious, you kind of alluded to this already with architecture, but growing up, did you always expect to be in some kind of creative industry?
Not really. I was very lost when I was young about what to study. I had clear what not to study. I had I hate languages or anything related to speaking or social or anything that you need low. I know that anything that I need to study a lot to memorize things, I was really bad with that. But I was really good with math. But I like as well a lot drawing. So I was lost between, I didn't know exactly if go for something very artistic or something very technical because I like it both more or less. And I was like, I don't know, I could go for maybe a math career or a programmation career, but as well, I was tempted to go for an artist more field. And yeah, I had some of my family was an architect, and he was like, well, you could try architecture. It's like a little of both. There is a part that it's artistic, a part that it's more mathematical and analysis. And it was like, okay, let's try that. But it was mostly because I didn't know what to do. So I was like, yeah, this looks like can work.
Yeah, it's kind of like, that's a stable career. People get paid over there.
That's the thing. It's like, yeah, no worries, you will have a lot of job.
There's buildings out there, so people must be doing something.
Yeah, but funny enough, I finished my career in 2007, and in 2008, there was a big crisis, and in Spain, everything was architecture. So it hit really, really hard in Spain when 2008 comes out. And after a year from my career, I had no job anywhere.
Oh man, I am curious, you studied architecture, you studied structural analysis, is that right?
Yeah, so I did, in Spain, there is architecture and there is technical architecture. And technical architecture, it's a little less on the artistic side. It's mostly about a little more technical analysis, follow up with the construction, that all the materials are used properly, security on the construction. And then when I finished that, I was working as an architect and I did a master in structural analysis because it was when the crisis in 2008, there was no job. I was like, well, I will take one master in structural analysis to try to, while it's really bad situation for working, try to study more. And my idea was to go more into engineering. But when I finished the master, everything in Spain was really, really bad, even worse than before. But then was when I decided really to do okay, until then I was doing 3D, but it was mostly like a side job. And then I was like, well, I cannot work as an architect right now. Let's try to go fully 3D.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's like for you to transition from architecture to doing 3D as a career, what was that like? Was that a bit scary to decide okay, there's this thing I really enjoy doing, but it's more unproven in the sense that I've been investing so much time into this other thing. What was that like making that transition over to doing 3D full time?
Yeah, exactly. I had this fear of okay, I invest 6 years of my life studying for having a solid career. Okay, my parents told me you need to study and a career to get a solid income. And then 3D was kind of back then, I started in 2002 to start doing 3D. And I never thought that I will be able to live from 3D because back then in Spain, there was nothing really.
Alien definitely wasn't around, that's for sure.
I knew some people that was working in United States, and but for me it was it's impossible. I didn't even grasp the possibility to do that. And back then, I was starting to do a lot of 3D jobs for architectural visualization stuff for different studios, and the boys started running out. And I was working on a main studio doing architect stuff, And as well for them, I was doing 3D visualizations on the site, and I started doing it for other studios. So I knew that there was, okay, I could do some architectural visualization. But yeah, at the beginning, I was kind of like, I don't know if this will work. Mostly because, yeah, I was doing something that I didn't really study. I had all my studies in a field, and it's like, okay, I will leave all this to focus in something that I don't know. It was scary, but there was no job anyway, so it was kind of like, I need to do it.
You know, again, having that experience in architecture, this is a softball question because I'm pretty sure I know the answer, but were you able to leverage the previous experience you had going into your new industry, your new job?
Yes, at the beginning, because I was doing mostly architectural visualization at first, knowing to manage CAD plans and knowing all the architectural dimensions and things like that, it was super helpful. Then when I transitioned more into VFX, maybe not so much, but still day to day, there is still always something that it helps you. I had a building that it comes and the floors had a dimension that was like obviously wrong for someone that knows a little of architecture. And it's something that you can spot and you say, okay, you can kick back this and a dimension for a floor shouldn't be like this thin or this thick. Obviously, I am not using advanced analysis, structural analysis, but yeah, there is always something that it helps you.
That's cool. And I'm curious too, like fast forwarding a little bit, what was it like moving from, you know, again, close to Barcelona, but from Spain over to Canada to work in visual effects? I mean, both in terms of making the move from one side of the world to the other, but also at the same time, like transitioning from working perhaps at smaller boutique studios in Spain to perhaps some of the bigger studios like Scanline or other studios that you've worked for?
Yeah, it was pretty, it was fast because I was working as a freelance in Spain back then. And it was a disaster actually, because as well, it was kind of like the crisis was still going on. And I tried to go, I was working on a small studio doing mapping shows. Then I went freelance and I worked for 4 projects. And from these 4 projects, 2 or 3 of them, they never paid. And in Spain, the freelance stuff is really bad. You need to advance money to be working as a freelance, even if you are not getting paid. I had to pay a lot of money to work that I never get back. And I was like, oh, I am tired of this. So funny enough, it was my father that comes with a newspaper of a company that was working on La Sagrada Familia in Barcelona, and they was doing a projection. And I was following them. I know it by other works that they was doing that I like a lot. And I was like, okay, I will write them a mail saying like, hey, I am doing small mappings. And I write them, and in 2 hours they reply me. It's like, we have kind of like the team there preparing all the show. You should go there and meet them. So I went next day to Barcelona because I am from a small village. And I went with a pen. I didn't even have a demo reel or anything. The night before, I put all the tests that I did that looks like something together, and I showed them, and they was like, oh yeah, it's like, if you want to work with us, take a good code because it's called in Montreal. And in 2 weeks, I was in Montreal working with them. And it was not VFX when I moved to Montreal. I work for Moment Factory. They do mostly rock shows, mapping shows, interactive installations. That was pretty interesting too. I was there doing mostly distractions and motion graphics, but it was a wide variety of things that normally on a big VFX studio you don't do. I was doing edition. You were as well part of the initial concept. I was doing a lot of R&D. It was pretty cool. As well, quite of scary because I contact them by mail. They say, yeah, for sure, you come. I was like, okay, sure. But I was in Montreal without really no one contact. I didn't sign anything. I was like, man, maybe, I don't know
Is this real?
what I'm doing here. But yeah, everything works out very, very well.
Yeah, I'm really fascinated by like projection mapping in general. And yeah, can you talk a little bit about that industry and, you know, what it is, but what's involved, and I guess, yeah, some of the stuff you've done there? Because again, I find it really fascinating. It's something that I've never been involved in, but I've got a major appreciation for it. It just looks really cool.
Yeah, it's cool. The cool thing is that you work on a canvas that every time is different. So when you work in movie, maybe we'll change a little the aspect ratio, but more or less it's always the same. In mappings, you can be projecting in a huge building that it's like, resolutions are crazy. Maybe you are working with 26,000 pixels by 10,000 pixels. Sometimes we work with robots. I had a project with 6 robot arms that they was moving with 6 screens, and you had to deal with all this interaction. Sometimes it's interactivity content that it's mostly mixing Unreal with pre-created content. For sure, it's much more flexible, and every project is really different from one to each other. But it's pretty cool. It's very creatively, it's very cool. And as well, because a lot of times you project into buildings, having into account the shape of the building to do your projection. It's not just project something, it's having into account the architectural elements of the place you are projecting to be used in your projection. I found it pretty interesting, yeah, too. Sure.
Cool. No, I love that. Yeah, I'm always intrigued by that. And again, there's always interesting videos popping up on the web that capture people's attention that are all kind of leaning in that direction. And just to jump around a little bit, like talking about technology, I'm kind of curious whether it's deep fakes, whether it's just in general anything machine learning, but VR, anything else, like is there any big technology that you're really fascinated by at the moment, or even technology you're keeping your eye on for down the line that you're excited about?
I am playing with VR and this stuff, but not really focusing too much on it. I had the opportunity to work with the Microsoft HoloLens too. I had a small freelance project that it was pretty cool, but finally the project was not going through, but I had the possibility to play a little with it. But mostly for my day-to-day work, what I am checking mostly is real time, anything. So all the new stuff with the smoke solvers that are real time, it accelerates so much workflows. Now there is like, they start to pop up liquid stuff real time. Yeah. I found that anything that accelerates to do better things is to iterate more, do more iterations. So obviously, as fast as I can do these iterations, better. If I can do 20 iterations a day instead of 10, it's all this that you can improve.
Just in general, like CUDA was like such a huge shift, just anything GPU, just not only in terms of speed, but in terms of also just efficiency, because again, like video cards, there's always going to be a use for them somewhere in your team. So that was something at ILM, at least I realized talking with the IT team, was that you could give someone on the simulation team a super fast card, but the good thing is that once that video card kind of becomes redundant, that a better card comes out, there's always going to be a place somewhere in the company the next person gets it, whereas CPUs kind of just get thrown out the window. So it's kind of interesting just seeing in the last 10 years like how much GPU has kind of shifted from thinking about video games to actually now it's driving so much of what we're doing.
Yeah, sure. Now I think that the bottleneck, maybe it's the memory on the cards that needs to be increasing for the VFX purpose. But yeah, sure, it's making a big difference.
I can't wait till we get 256 gigabyte cards. It's gonna be a whole other thing. No, that's super cool. And for me, I'm very excited about, I was kind of surprised, but liquid solvers on the GPU, just because I think maybe I hate waiting for liquid sims so much in general. So it's kind of fascinating. I mean, obviously the detail's not quite there, but just the fact that getting to a point where things are interactive versus needing to wait days or weeks sometimes for water sims and doing stuff like that. Like I'm very excited to kind of see where that all goes.
Yeah, sure. Anything that I really hate waiting as well. So I always try to do setups that are very easy, simple, and that I can iterate very, very, very easily over it. I think that you start playing with TypeFlow as well.
Yeah, I haven't in a while, but yeah.
But with TypeFlow, it's like so a joy to use because it's so fast. Being able to move to frame 60 and I start moving stuff and seeing like almost real time all the changes, it just speeds up so much my workflows.
Yeah, I haven't actually been on the box for a while, unfortunately, and that's actually a good point though. Is just I was kind of surprised by TypeFlow because I think it gave a lot of power to a lot of users without the complexity that you usually have to deal with. Like that was a huge kind of advantage of particle flow, like as an example of like the simplicity meant that even a person who's not in effects can pick it up and just start working with it. But then you get into Houdini, you get into even ice back in the day, but also obviously thinking particles. It does require a different kind of style of thinking altogether and can be very daunting for people. But type flow, I felt, was a great example where you can have a lot of power, but also it's still fun and easy to do, which yeah, is an intriguing way to kind of get people excited about effects again.
Yeah, you need to approach things a little different because, yeah, say it in TP or Houdini, you have so much deep control. But sometimes I am in type flow, it's like, oh, I am limited this way because I cannot do this, or I will do it in TP or in Houdini. But then you think another way that it's maybe you just use a helper to activate these things, or instead of doing a complex calculation based on distance and I don't know what, keep it simple. And most of the times it works exactly. The end result is the same. It's just different approach, but yeah, sure.
You're right. Yeah, because there's times where it's like, oh, I want to drive it, something spinning based on these three things. It's like, well, I can still get something to look good. It just you're right. It's forcing you to actually think simpler in a good way, not a bad way. So
yeah, and it's something I notice a lot. A lot of people likes to overcomplicate things.
Oh yeah.
In Houdini, I see it a lot, but it happens everywhere in TP or all the software that allows you to do so many things in a deep level. A lot of people likes to overcomplicate something for not real reason, and then you lose control over fast approach. You get sometimes setups that the director wants to change a small thing. And you open the setup and there is so many things to tweak this thing to be able to do the specific thing that you want that it's almost impossible. And sometimes keeping it simple, it speeds up so much the iteration
Definitely.
process.
It was interesting. I'm working with a team at the moment. We're transitioning to working with an agile workflow. And I was thinking about this the other day because half the team are programmers, half the team are artists. And I feel like with coding, you can always go back and you can refactor your code. You can, spend a lot of time on things, but generally you kind of get to a point where you're like, that's done, move to the next thing. But with art, it's kind of like, it's never going to be done. You got to, have the experience to know like, okay, step away and move to the next thing. And I think that artists tend to go down these rabbit holes of like, I can make this so complex. And, there are times that I've worked with people where you ask them like, hey, there's one shot and we need to create some sparks. Go do that. And then 3 days later, it's like, hey, where's the shot? It's like, well, I've created this really cool spark tool that's driven all these things and da 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 da. It's like, cool. Well, we didn't need that because it's a standalone shot. Where's the shot? It's like, well, I haven't done the shot yet, but like, look at this cool tool. So it's addictive to just go down these rabbit holes. But again, like thinking simply is a way to kind of force yourself to avoid the depth and focus on just, what you got to do and move on to the next.
Yeah. Over the time, I found that simplicity is always the key, because when you need to reduce this same thing, if you overcomplicate it, that even you yourself, maybe you do a setup 2 years ago and you reopen it, it's like, what?
I was just about to say, like a week later, you come back, you're like, I don't remember how this works.
Yeah. Well, what is controlling what? And if you keep it simple, it's with less controls, you get much more. You grab it another year and you only see like these 5 things, and it's like, okay, it's easy.
And talking about simulation, how did you first get involved in Scanline and also, just kind of you kind of moving into doing effects, destruction, which again is poetic considering your background. So, I mean, for you, like living now in Montreal at the time and kind of making that transition to working feature film, like what was that like? And I'd love to hear a bit about it.
Yeah, so at the beginning, my transition from architecture to mappings was because I was a little tired of architecture visualization. It was like, you are doing buildings, and it's like one building after the other. In a company, I was doing architectural visualization, but they introduced me a little into advertising. So I was doing a little of comm, I was doing a little of motion graphics, mostly animating logos, very simple stuff. But then I discovered the effects stuff. And I was like, oh, that's cool. And the first 2 courses that I purchased was from you. So I bought particle flow fundamentals. I think it was the second time that you do it for CG Talk. And then I discovered like, okay, I can do like cool stuff with particle flow. And the second one was VFX 1.
Oh god.
As well on digital, like videos with 360p resolution. Like,
man, yeah.
Really,
long time ago.
always. But yeah, I discovered something that I really like, because it was very artistic, but as well it has the technical stuff that I was not doing when I was doing architectural visualization. I was like, okay, that I like it. So yeah, I started doing more and more of that only for my site, doing videos, but I never kind of like worked for something like that. And then when the crisis struck, I contacted this company in Spain that they was doing mapping shows. I worked with them, and I was able to use a little of these tools. And yeah, my changing point, I guess, was when I discovered TP. Because I was doing particle flow, but then one day I decided to go into thinking particles. And I think that it was as well for one video that you post this showcasing shape collision and how good it was. Like a simple volume break with shape collision, breaking a box. And I was like, oh, that's so bad. I was struggling always with popping up particles and things. So this looks good, and let me try it. And at the beginning, I tried one day and I was like, I don't understand anything, and I keep it apart. But then after a while, I restarted, like, okay, I think I need to try this harder. There a lot of people helped me out, like Christo Belep had a cool tutorial series, and I was like, okay, that's great. And I started doing a lot of research by my own, and I was posting it on places like Vimeo. And one guy contacted me, and it was the co-CEO from Sivas Technologies. It was there is Edwin, that is more the programmer, and there is another guy that he was kind of like dealing with. He was a capital investment guy, and he was like, man, I love what you are doing here. I would like you to be on the beta, because I really don't understand much TP. I see the value of it, but I don't understand it. And with your tool, because I create Demolition Master, a tool that breaks things and stuff like that. It's like, with this tool, I can do cool stuff without really knowing anything. And we need more of that stuff in the beta. So there I joined the beta, and I was very active, like testing everything. They were starting introducing bullet and fluids, and I was helping a lot. And there was Joe Scar that was very active. The Joe Scar was the FX guy at the Scanline at the time, and he saw all what I was doing. He was like, hey, I want you in Vancouver. And back then I was in Moment Factory, and I was like, okay, I'm not sure. I never did totally FX. And he was like, you will be fine. I saw what you can do. Come here. And it was because of that I moved from Montreal to Vancouver, and I joined Scanline.
That's so cool. What was it like? I mean, in general, I think it's so fun, especially early in your career when, like, let's say I get charisma over at Afterworks for VFX. Like, I remember writing a tutorial on Afterburn back in like the late 90s, and getting an email, from him was like, exciting, at the time. And like, what's it kind of like to kind of get that validation in a way of like the thing that you're doing and spending a lot of time on, because I'm assuming you're just excited about it, and then kind of having the people who make it, let's say, reach out and say, hey, like, we love your stuff. Like, like, what's that kind of like to you?
It was overwhelming, and it was like, oh man, I'm also kind of like not sure, because it's like VFX. I don't even know what it is to work on a big VFX studio. And curious enough, in the same one day after the other, I have the contact from Scanline, and the other one was from Blur Studios. That is the other studio that I was like.
Did you say Blur?
Blur, yeah.
Yeah, cool.
And they was like, we was checking your stuff on Vimeo, and we would like to have a chat with you. And I was also considering to go there, but finally, for 1 year, we went through visa stuff, but it was too complicated, and finally it didn't go through. But it was like funny, like in a period of 1 week, I had the two contact of two great companies. Oh,
that's awesome.
It's awesome. But at the same time, I was really kind of like, I don't know what, because I didn't do any formal education on the field. I don't even know how. I was very scared, because I as well, I didn't do much programmation or scripting. And on my mind, it was like, well, there, everyone will be top scripters, and they will be like super technical, and maybe I will not know back then I was using After Effects. I was using a lot of tools, but I don't know actually what they use there. So it was kind of a scare, but actually I'm very excited, obviously. And yeah, it ended very good. Now it's like 7 years and a half at the Scanline. But yeah, the first weeks I was scared of the pipeline and everything. It was kind of overwhelming the first weeks.
I'm curious too, just to kind of talk about like Spain versus Canada or US. Like for you, I'm assuming you kind of needed to be a bit of a generalist in, you know, in the most case to work in Spain. Like that to me was always the thing. Is I feel like a lot of us outside North America, I'll keep it simple, but with that, yeah, I honestly feel like a lot of people outside of that industry, especially back 10, 15 years, you kind of needed to know everything, and that was something that for me at least. Coming to the US, I was kind of surprised at how people were kind of more trained to do one thing. And for you, like, what was it like? Like, do you think it's very beneficial to kind of, even if you are doing like one area, to at least understand the whole spectrum of 3D and like people texture stuff, people light stuff, people comp? Like, how does that work? So that way you can be more of a fluid artist overall.
I think that actually it helped me a lot. Knowing a little of everything. As you said, here there is a lot of people that they do this stuff. And if there is a problem in the model, they need to kick it back. And sometimes it's like kicking back stuff into a big pipeline production. Sometimes it's like 2 days, 3 ways of waiting for something that is very easy for you to fix. So a lot of stuff, it's, yeah, you get something, there is a problem in modeling, okay, whatever, I will fix it and keep going on. It helps a lot to be able to be more productive. Because most of the time, yeah, you will be doing your concrete task, but you always need to be doing some stuff. And it helps, like, sometimes I need to do some distraction, but if you can put some texture and do some texture work there, it helps to sell your shot that maybe without texturing, or you need to do a crack. Sometimes like, instead of doing some complex stuff, I will animate a texture that it appears there, and when the effect supervisor saw it with the texture, it's like, okay, it's solved, it's good. But without this, it will be very, very, very complex to achieve the same. So yeah, for sure, it's something I think it's very valuable.
With you transitioning over to Scanline, like, what was the first film project you worked on?
I think it was Pan. Yes, Pan. Peter Pan. There was a lot of particles. Actually, there I didn't know too much magma flow and Krakatoa. I knew a little, but I never went too deep into magma flow.
Me neither. I know how to hook up my diffuse and UV coordinates. I'm like, okay, it's good. I'm gonna go back to everything else.
And the first shot that they give me, it was like a crazy magma flow, 10 layers of magma flow setups with crazy stuff, and I was like, oh my god, I will never. They will fire me like in a week. But then, yeah, I had my FX lead back then that was Goran Pavles, that we went becoming very good friends. And he was like, no worries, it's not different than TP, check, it's different names, but at the end you are doing almost the same. And yeah, after, it took me like a week to know what was going on. But yeah, it was like a project with a lot of particle stuff. There was like a lot of fireflies flying around, and like millions of these things that we was moving around. And there was a moment that the character, it's the mother of Pan, it comes to life, but it comes to life with all these fireflies that makes the form of the mother. And we had to do the face and the hair and all the cloth. It was with kind of particles, and it was cool. It was challenging as well, but it was fun. I learned a lot, yeah.
And speaking of which, like, you guys started Effective TDs, right? Like, I'm curious, like, for you guys to kind of jump into that, how did that come about? And at the same time, like, how important do you think it is to give back in terms of training and helping others in your community?
Yeah, for me I always receive a lot of help from the community. I had cool tutorials from everywhere, and I learned basically thanks to online stuff. It's kind of like crazy to be able to have a job that you learn online nowadays. Yeah. When I thought before it was like, always, no, you need to career. Now it's like, well, now I can have a good career without proper but it's called a proper university training or whatever. And yeah, it was like I always had been doing things like YouTube stuff. And with Goran, we had this question that back then we didn't saw any place related to effects that was focused into effects training in general, like no matter if it's Houdini, Max TP, to try to get into a place all this stuff. And at the same time, we had all this cool stuff from different people at the Scanline that they create tools. We had Fast Cutter, Razor to cut stuff. We had my friend Sebastian that created a store that it's like a particle solver. Like, okay, we could try to put in a place all this together and do cool training for effects. And we created Effective 3Ds with a forum that the idea it was like it's effect related no matter the software. The thing is like over time, we had this going on for 4 or 5 years, but we had lack of time, both of us, to create learning material. And it's 2 months ago, we stopped the store. Right. The forum is still there and we still keep service, but we had to stop it because we had a lawyer, we had paying all the fees for doing all the. It was a lot of work for at the end. It was not super profitable, basically because we was not able to have time. Both of us. He has his own studio, and I work and I do a lot of different freelance stuff on the side. It was like, okay, we need to.
Did you guys learn a lot from that whole experience?
Yeah, sure. I managing the store and all the client relationships with different people was pretty cool. Yeah.
Cool. I'd love to talk a bit about, let's say, some of the projects you've worked on, because again, you've worked on many exciting projects. In terms of Batman vs Superman is a good starting point. What was that like working on that film?
Batman vs Superman. The thing is like everything is a little fuzzy because you don't know exactly what shot it is what. I had Batman vs Superman and I had different superhero movie films. In Batman vs Superman, I will need to check the shots again to know what I did there. Mostly what I do is a lot of rigid body destructions. There, actually, on Batman vs Superman, I think I did a lot of RBD stuff, and I was doing flow line stuff. I never, because we have flow line that is our in-house liquid and smoke solver at the Scanline. Yeah. And there, I think it's the first time I used quite a lot flow line. I was using it before time to time, but there I use it more. So I had to learn better to use the tool. But yeah, normally it's always like a lot of crazy shots. I will say that there I did a lot of distractions. I will need to check again the shots to remember what I did exactly.
I mean, again, when you can't remember what exactly you've done, it just means that you've definitely done a lot.
It's always the thing is like Justice League, Batman vs Superman, Aquaman. I am always mixing up a little the shots I did in one place or the other.
I still remember for me, I was in New York and I went to see one of the Transformers films, and the girl I was dating at the time, I nudged her for one of the shots I worked on. I was like, that was one of my things. And then like a minute later, I'm like, wait, no, that's it there.
Maybe not.
Just to kind of show like how many explosions and how much destruction is in that film. I can't distinguish my shots from anybody else's.
Yeah, I am working a lot, jumping from one project to another, trying to help here and there. Sometimes right now I am working on Stranger Things, the last season.
I just had Aaron Sims, he designed the Demogorgon creature for it and did all the visual effects for season 1, his studio. I had him on yesterday to nerd out about some of the stuff he's doing, but sorry.
No, yeah. So yeah, I was in another shot and I pop up to this one shot to help in a specific thing, and then I will move to another project. So a lot of times it's like go to help on this specific place and then move on.
And I'm curious, like Game of Thrones, I think is one that hopefully that one kind of stands out from the others. But I mean, again, like some of the sequences in that have been like, well, all of them have been really phenomenal. But can you talk a little bit about your contributions on a show like that and some of the stuff you did? I'd love to kind of hear a bit about it.
this one was cool because we had all the destruction on the last episode where we destroy all the buildings, and it looks like insane RBD destructions. We did everything with thinking particles there, as well flow line for the fire from the dragon. And the cool thing I did there that I like it a lot, it was to do the dragon. There is a sequence where the dragon wakes up and it's covered with snow. And this moment, it's kind of like you don't understand at the beginning what it is. It looks like a pile of snow mixed with debris. And then you see that it's a dragon waking up. And all the snow stuff, I did it with a storm. That storm is a tool that we were selling on Effective Technical Directors from my friend Sebastian Scheffer. And they asked me to do the shot, and I was like, well, yeah, I will. They was like, you will be able to do that? It's like, yeah, sure. But I would like to use a tool that we are developing. It's like, okay, what tool it is? It's Houdini. It's like, no, it's a tool that my friend is doing. It's like, but okay, but you will be able to deliver? It's like, yeah, sure. But the tool back then, it was still in beta testing. We didn't even, it was not public to buy. It's like, no worries. I think that they was a little worried because it was in parallel. There was someone Houdini doing the same. But after a day, I showcased the first version, and they was like, okay, yeah, we will keep going. It's good. So yeah, it was pretty fun because also I was with Sebastian at the same time, back to back, like, hey, I will need this specific thing to control better that. So he was programming it, giving it to me. It's like, okay, now I can control it better. So yeah, that was pretty cool. I enjoy a lot this. Being able to use a tool at the same time that it was the first time being used in a big production.
I remember there was like one production that I was producing and supervising for my old studio, and there's a technical director that I worked with back in Australia, and there's a bunch of liquid shots I needed, and I wanted to hire him, and he gave me his freelance rate, which was quite high, but then he said, I'm also developing my own proprietary liquid software, so if you let me just kind of use that and have fun with it, then I'll do it for like half the rate. And I was just like, okay, that sounds cool. So it was just interesting seeing him like being able to kind of art direct everything and just coding up new solutions on the fly to be able to add to it. So in a lot of ways, it's kind of fun to get to be involved in software that actually can be shaped more towards your needs versus, out of the box, which is generally designed for everybody.
Yeah, it's something that we have very cool at the Scanline with Flowline, where if there is any need for any specific stuff, you ask and you get it.
Yeah, in general, like I guess, what are some of the other projects you worked on that, like, is there anything that specifically stood out to you as being quite challenging that is kind of stuck with you over time?
I like a lot of project I did in Moment Factory. Again, it was with robot stuff. We had 6 robots with 6 screens on each robot, and this robot was moving. And the cool thing about that, this robot was in a ship. It was in a Royal Caribbean ship. Back then, it was the 3rd biggest ship in the world. And it was very cool because it was 1.5 year project, and I was involved on the R&D from the beginning. So I was animating the robot's arms. I had to flew a couple of times to Detroit to do the initial test with the robots because we had to have animation on the screens that was coordinating it with the animation of the robot, and it was quite challenging. We had the first times the robots was crashing one with the other. At the beginning it was like, oh my god, this will be a nightmare, but it became really, really fun as well. For some of the shots that we was doing, we were recording characters. So when the screen was rotating, we want to have the impression that wherever it's filmed, when the spectator is seeing it, it has the real 3D illusion. So when the screen is rotating, you have the illusion that what you are seeing there is a 3D object. So we wanted to involve plate, live action. So we get a Milo camera where we was filming a character dancing, and this screen was becoming a box with a character inside. So if the screen was tilting left, the camera had to tilt right to get the illusion of everything working on. So I was kind of like a month or 2 months planning all the Milo camera movements. And it was challenging because I never worked with Milo cameras before. And they simply give me the prospects of the Milo camera. And it was like a technical sheet about every motor, how much they can rotate, and what speeds they can rotate, to figure out what movement was able to do with the robots. So I create a rig system in 3ds Max with TP, and it was calculating. I was moving the screen, and when I was moving the screen, I had the 3D camera, that was the Milo camera, moving in the 3D space, and I had alerts from each motor when it was triggering too high speed for the motor. I knew that I couldn't move so much this screen. So it was quite complex, but then it was 2 days of shooting of all the setup, and I was involved in the shooting with the guys that come with a Milo from the United States and all that stuff that cost a lot of money. And I was like, oh my God, if this doesn't work, this will be crazy, because I was planning for 2 months, and the first test was horrible. So imagine we had 2 days to film everything. I had this huge camera there set up, and every time that we was trigger an animation, the camera was stopping, triggering an alert for too high speed that was not able to achieve. And they was like, no, this is not working. The files that you give us, they are too fast. And I was like, I don't understand. I have been like trying to be very specific for all this to work. I don't understand. And finally we found the problem, and it was that in order to give my camera that I did in Max as an FBX to the Milo system, it was going through Maya. Mm-hmm. And I was working in 3 frames per second, but when they was importing it into Maya, it was in 24 frames per second. So then everything was speed up. And when I found that, it's like, oh, but you are working in 20 frames per second. Then everything was smooth. We found that it was like, and then the 2 days was like perfect. Everything was in sync. The camera was moving, all the robots was in line. And at the end it was like kind of like the achievement goal, like, okay, everything works out and all the planning works out.
Yeah, I feel like it's frame rate from jumping from one scene to another, or to another program in general. Like, it's always the thing that someone somewhere forgot, and it's later on, it's like, why are we like 3 frames off, or 20 frames off? Like, what the hell's going on? And it's always someone merged something into another file, and they default settings were at PAL like 25 frames, or something went wrong.
But at the beginning, because I was dealing with robots, I was like, I never thought that it's like a frame per second.
Milo rigs are
maybe I just
annoying.
screw up with my calculations. Maybe there was so many things involved. I really fucked up. And then when I found out, it's like, oh no, it's just the
frame rate. Damn it!
It's like, and everything worked super smooth after that.
I was curious about scripting as well. I mean, obviously, you coming from more of a math background always helps, but in general, what's your opinion on artists learning to script and kind of having the ability to create their own tools?
It always helps, obviously. I am really bad at scripting, for example, and I try to learn, but it's simply maybe not my thing. The thing is, like, I did some scripts and I can do a scripting, but I know that at the Scanline, on a big facility, I know the people that if I ask him something that I will take 1 day, he will take 5 minutes. Mm-hmm. So it's like, at the end, it's like, yeah, I could do some stuff, but why waste my time? And if someone else can do it in like so less. But obviously it's super valuable, and knowing at least the minimums to automate some basic stuff, it obviously helps a lot. Yes.
Cool. And I guess just to talk about like YouTube for a second, because you've got your YouTube channel. I never get to watch them, but whenever I do, I'm always like, I need to watch more. But you always do the monthly updates. Just in general, like how important do you think it is for people to be able to show their personal work, and also for you, like being able to give back to the community and be able to make videos to educate others? Like, how important is that to you?
Yeah, for me, I do it because 3D was my hobby, and I always liked to do 3D stuff. And it was kind of like, I found that a lot of people found it very valuable, and I can give back what I get at my time. So from a simple point of like, okay, let's just help other people, I think it's cool, at least how I see it. But then I found that nowadays with all the technology, everything being 3D, being able to expose your work as much as you can, it's so valuable. I found all my jobs it's mostly because someone saw a Vimeo thing that I did or a YouTube thing that I did, and then they reach to you. And I found that now with YouTube, a lot of people coming from the companies like, oh, I know you from YouTube, or I know you because I follow your tutorial in thinking particles, and it's like, oh, it's kind of cool too that some people know your work, and I guess that, yeah, it opens a lot of doors. Now I am doing contracts with Intel as a freelance. That it's because I started doing YouTube videos, and it's like I never thought that I would be able to work with Intel or with Autodesk as well. I help them doing sometimes some material process. It opens a lot of doors, and I think it's so easy. Anyone can do a YouTube video. I have a very bad English, for example. At the beginning, I was really concerned with my English, but at the end, it's like, I think if you give valuable content, and
if anything, I think it makes you stand out. You know what I mean? Because I tend to hide my Australian accent just because people in the States seem to ask me like, do you have electricity in Australia, or do you have cities? So I just want to kind of like make it not a conversation. But yeah, I mean, if anything, own it. Like having an accent is something that's going to make you stand out from everybody else who sounds the same. So I think it's a secret weapon. I don't think it's a bad thing whatsoever.
Maybe. I never wanted to show my face because it's always something that I guess that people relate more to you. They see you, but at the same time you need to, I don't know, it's something that's...
Yeah, I think it's so important over just audio, but like I wrestled with that for a very long time. I'd be looking at my face, and like, I had really bad teeth as well, and like just anything I could pick apart about myself, I'd be like, I can't be on camera. So it's I think it's a universal thing. I think that everyone kind of wrestles with whatever, things that their inner narrative telling them, you're not good enough, or don't do this. Moving from architecture into visual effects, into working at one of the leading studios that Netflix just acquired, and working on movies that, and again, doing such challenging things. Like the stuff you guys do is not easy by any means. Like, do you ever have moments of like imposter syndrome, or especially back earlier about like, hey, am I good enough, or am I going to fail, or whatever kind of things that pop into your head, or am I going to look terrible on video? These are all things that we all wrestle with.
Yeah, totally. Mostly the first 2 months, I remember talking with Goran, what was my lead. I was like, man, I think I am not for this. I totally think that I am screwing up. I think that, and he was like, no, man, you are doing awesome. You are. Yeah, at the beginning I was like really so many things, and maybe at the beginning you have one shot that you cannot achieve what they are expecting, and you start to question it a lot yourself, like maybe I am not for this. Mostly when it's your first gig on a big FX studio, and sometimes they was asking me some stuff. I remember one shot that this typical shot that they don't know exactly what they want, and it was changing. Every week was changing. First needs to be rocks, then they want to be sun, then needs to be looking like liquid by sun, then needs to be like, and every week I had to change all the setup, and anything was working. And I put it out on me like, oh, I think that I am not delivering. And it was like, no, it's like, it's the process of like trying to get a good result, but it's like not that you are delivering anything. But yeah, I get this quite a lot, thinking about maybe I am not for that. But then you start delivering projects and people start to be happy, and I guess that it's like, well, maybe I am doing good here.
I love that. No, this has been so awesome. And of course, I'll link to everything in the show notes, but where can people go to find out more about you and all the cool, fun things that you've been up to?
I have the personal website that it's on vfx.com. I have YouTube that I post monthly videos about 3ds Max, and I do as well tutorials and stuff like that. I do mostly more in YouTube. I try to keep it generalistic. Back on the days, I was doing a lot of specific stuff, like thinking particles and stuff, but I saw that not so many people was interested. And I decided to start doing mostly more general elements. And then I have a Patreon where I post more specific stuff. I am covering a lot of type flow there right now, time to time thinking particles, but lately it's a lot of type flow because I see a lot of interest from the people. So if you want to follow me there, I think it's interesting content.
That's awesome. Again, Eli, this has been so great to catch up. Finally, I think, as I said before we started, this is way overdue. So yeah, it's been fun. And yeah, I'll definitely link to everything in the show notes. And again, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me here. It was a pleasure.